how much this company has grown. And obviously, it is one of the most visited websites right now in crypto. That being said, to learn a bit more about this journey and get some in-depth details, I want to welcome Brendan Ches, the founder of CoinMarketCap, and he will explain more how this all happened. So please give a big applause for Brendan.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Capital, CoinMarketCap's very first crypto conference. I'm Brandon, the founder of CoinMarketCap. And today we have a very special guest to kick off our first event. Sunny King, the creator of proof of stake and innovative cryptocurrencies like PeerCoin and PrimeCoin. Sunny, it's truly an honor to be up here on the stage with you. Give a round of applause for Sunny, guys. So, Sunny, I know this is the first time you've ever done something like this. Now I'm in the same boat. How are you feeling today?
That's great. Great honor to meet you here.
Yeah, likewise. So, are you ready to dive into a few topics?
Sure, of course, why not?
Okay. All right, so let's talk about proof of stake. I feel like the majority of coins that are on CoinMarketCap today are either directly using proof of stake consensus or have been heavily influenced by it. I'm quite curious, what was the original inspiration behind proof of stake? Maybe you can give a few thoughts about some of the ideas that you were grappling with at the time.
Sure. When we started work on the PeerCoin project, I think not very interesting to just clone Bitcoins. And so what if we try something new and try to do some innovative work? So how about trying to see whether energy consumption is actually required for decentralization? So it's fortunate that when one puts enough belief in the merits of proof of stake, and it turned out that indeed it can completely replace proof of work consensus and eliminate the energy problem.
Right, and kind of a follow-up question. So when you first invented proof of stake, how did you envision the impact of such a change on the consensus algorithm on the blockchain? Did you have any fears, and did they come to pass?
I think the first important step was actually have some faith in the merits of proof of stake, that it can stand as independent consensus algorithm. Otherwise, maybe a more incremental design would actually be attempted instead. I think eventually the important result for the effort was the solution to the energy consumption problem. So the energy problem is actually not only an environmental or cost issue. It is actually the so-called horizontal scalability problem for the blockchain technology. So early on, in PeerCoin, there was encountered some issues. So obviously, it's not a trivial problem to solve. So there was some initial issues. So there was discovered a weakness against stake grinding, what is called. This problem was solved in the beginning of 2013. This problem was that an attacker can actually greatly amplify their minting power by exploiting some weakness in the protocol. So after that, PeerCoin has been quite stable. PeerCoin nowadays continues to demonstrate the merits of proof of stake consensus to the blockchain industry. So there are some other concerns that other people mentioned. Nothing at stake as a potential problem for proof-of-stake consensus. But I think this is highly debatable. This problem was the assumption that the minters who want to mint on would actually want to mint on all the chain forks, thus preventing the formation of consensus. However, we must realize that the thesis of a proof stake is that if one becomes a stakeholder, then one is incentivized to do good for the network. So would a rational minter value a chance for a small reward over the potential large damage that can be done to the whole network? So the answer, I think, is obviously no, in my opinion. In practice, we don't see people motivated to attack network this way at all.
Right. So the nothing at stake problem, that's something you don't feel like it's a problem at all.
Right, not a practical problem.
Practical problem, right? Okay. So when we explore the yields of a network running proof-of-stake algorithms, how does its economic incentives and outcomes differ from that of a proof-of-work blockchain? And maybe you can give a couple examples there.
Sure, of course. So in proof-of-stake system, so the network will give out minting rewards, just like proof-of-work does to give out mining rewards. So it's kind of like what proof-of-work does there, but it's not the energy in mining that's driving the service. So there's actually it's the coins or the capitals that's driving the minting service. So there's naturally you can talk about the concept of interest rate. So that's how much coins you stake versus the amount of rewards that you're getting from the service. So you can talk about the interest rate there. So this can be viewed that users who do not participate in the minting service, that would subsidizes those who participate in minting service. As this is considered providing a security service for the entire network. So from the network point of view, they want to give this subsidized to the minters to provide this security service. So within its own economic system in this blockchain, this actually can be considered a risk-free interest rate. Also, from the point of view outside the system, basically one is losing to inflation if one does not participate in minting. Typically in such a system, a fixed inflation rate is chosen to sustain a minting market and to maintain a fixed proportionate level of network security. This point actually I'll explain just a little bit more. I'll give you some examples that Peercoin actually use a 1% interest rate for the minting service, and V Systems uses a 5% interest rate for the minting service.
So why the 5%? Why did you choose that number?
Oh, so this is really depends on how much security level you want to reach. So it's basically you give a higher interest rate, meaning that you would encourage more participation into the minting service for the minting market. So give lower interest, that means you want to pay less subsidized. So the user that's using the coins in other purpose won't lose too much to the inflation. So I'll give an explanation to what this interest rate seems like it's only specific to proof stake this way. but actually it also applies to proof of work systems. But people don't see this. This is because in Bitcoin's design, this interest rate is masked. Bitcoin actually wanted to be a better store of value than gold. So it actually deliberately designed to set a cap for total supply. So in this case, then the inflation rate has to approach zero. Actually, it's approaching zero geometrically in the sense that actually in the mathematical sense, that is actually a pretty fast reduction to zero inflation. Although it's prolonged by a 4-year half, so it takes longer, maybe 20, 30 years to show obvious results. But in math term, it's considered a fast reduction. So this is actually at the expense of network security, possibly not keeping up with time. In terms of the ratio, so if you consider the ratio between the mining market revenue and the network market cap, so this is what we call the relative security level. This relative security level actually is dropping as the time move on. So in the long run, Bitcoin is rather dependent on the transaction fee market to make up the lost revenues of the minters. To make a fair comparison between proof of work consensus and proof of stake consensus, so we need to pick a fixed level of security. So the fixed level of relative security to the market cap, then we will actually see a non-zero inflation rate will still show up. So because because if you consider there's an alternative design approach to actually acknowledge the minimum inflation rate needed to secure the network, to maintain the network relative security level. So the alternative approach is to have a minimum inflation rate, but let the transaction fees be destroyed to counter inflation. So this is different to Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually give the transaction, let the miners to collect the transaction fees. So in my opinion, this alternative approach is a better approach that can provide a better and more stable security to the network while actually still conditionally preserving the strong store of value property of Bitcoin. So basically, if you get a lot of users, a lot of transactions, the transaction fees so lots of transaction fees are burned, so that still like the total supply might actually even go down.
Right. Okay. Yeah, maybe a couple more questions here. Let's see. So I've heard that you are quite supportive of the long tail of crypto, as am I. So today we have thousands of crypto assets on CoinMarketCap. How do you feel about the recent talk about consolidation towards Bitcoin, and what do you feel is the outlook for the thousands of other crypto assets in the long run?
Yes, I think not only that. I would doubt that even in just base cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin might not be able to dominate like that in the long term. So for the thousands or even more other cryptos, I think you guys don't lose hope yet and take it to Bitcoin. The fact of the matter is that we need more than just currencies. It's going to be a whole economy. So plenty of space for all kinds of blockchain. For a healthy and prosperous economy, the base currency is critical, but it should be only a small part of it. Someone might think Bitcoin will continue to dominate forever, but it is actually pretty hard. Bitcoin was not gold after all. It was the first cryptocurrency But in the technology world, the challenge for domination can be daunting. Besides, Bitcoin has some risk factors I just mentioned that with its design probably coming up within the next 10 to 20 years. So when the generation of new Bitcoins reduces to minimal, we shall see whether Bitcoin can sustain a good enough mining market by the collection of transaction fees. Now even if manages that, there are still concerns that 51% attacks might eventually get to Bitcoin. So remember, this year we see it can get to a top 20 project with a proof of work consensus. So if this type of event happens to Bitcoin eventually, of course, it would not bode well for its long-term dominance.
Okay. Yeah, maybe one more question here. So according to quantum theoreticians, quantum computing can be a boon for verifying the integrity of proof-of-stake selections. Since quantum computers like Google Sycamore can already run calculations like this, what kind of impact do you see this on proof-of-stake and cryptocurrency in general?
Frankly, I wouldn't be too worried about that. So let's challenge Google for. I think it's a very hard problem, and let's challenge Google for an integer factorization first. I think. So the fact that they couldn't demonstrate that, instead they demonstrate a very little known problem, speak volumes as to the difficulty of such an engineering feat. So before, I mean, like really, the integer factorization was the problem to do that when this all started. So before more meaningful, so I think by that time maybe we could give a more meaningful talk about the supremacy that should be taken as its face value. So my understanding is quantum computation for the foreseeable future will be limited to special domain computations. So for proof of stake, it doesn't really require much computation, so there's really not much about it. But if, say, proof of work mining is sped up, we also don't see a huge problem there, as you already experienced in ASICs. As to maybe the more important thing is that the public key cryptography, which is considered maybe going to be broken at some point by quantum computer. But I think it turns out to be a problem. It's going to be industry-wide to the entire technology sector rather than just blockchain. So pretty sure, I mean, there will be definitely new public key systems to migrate to.
Right. Okay. So it seems like you're not, in general, not too worried about quantum computing.
Right.
Right. So yeah, everyone heard it here.
But yeah, I would be very interested to see Google demonstrating integer factorization. That'll be quite amazing. That there'll be a major technology breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I think before we ask some questions, take some audience questions, do you have anything else you wanted to discuss, Sunny? Or if not, you can see if there's any questions. Okay, let's see. I actually don't see any questions in the Q&A, so. Well, that's okay. Well, do you have any last thoughts, Sonny?
Actually, so I have some question for you. So back in 2012 and 2013, there were really not too many altcoins yet. So you were clearly early in getting into the crypto information portal business. So what motivated you to start the CoinMarketCap?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So it was originally a side project that I kind of created to serve my own needs. So in 2012 and early 2013, I was doing a lot of research on altcoins. And one of the metrics that I found myself constantly calculating by hand was this notion of like a market cap, right? Like, so as you know, it's price times the coin supply. So I felt like this metric was a relatively simple way to compare the market size compared to Bitcoin. So for example, was this altcoin 10 times smaller, 100 times smaller, even 1,000 times smaller? It was really hard to tell that kind of thing. So eventually I set up a simple website that ranked coins on this metric and just ranked them in descending order. And fortunately other members of the community found it pretty useful. The community really encouraged me to make continual improvements to the site. So what you see today is really a product of years of community feedback. So yeah, I really thank the community for the help back then and today as well.
Oh, so at the time, did you already envision a prosperous crypto market with so many different blockchains and tokens?
So I think, yeah, kind of. I mean, from the early days of CoinMarketCap, I always knew that there would be alternatives to Bitcoin, but I didn't immediately realize the eventual speed at which new alternatives would be introduced into the market. So I thought there would be a slow and steady growth, to be honest, but I think it was around like the 100th coin that I added that's when I truly realized how prosperous the alternative crypto market would be.
So what do you think about the current Bitcoin dominance?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm not too surprised about the recent consolidation towards Bitcoin. So after observing a few market cycles, it seems that in bear markets, speculators are much less willing to place their bets on anything but Bitcoin. But I feel like after Bitcoin reaches a new all-time high, I expect that the pattern will hold and Bitcoin's dominance will kind of decrease, unless of course there's a fundamental shift in confidence.
So recently we heard a lot about Libra and also maybe China's DCEP coming up. So are they the ultimate stable coins? So what do you think such a system will affect the blockchain ecosystem and the cryptocurrencies?
Yes, Libra. Yeah, I find coins like Libra and DCEP pretty fascinating because they could have big implications for mainstream awareness. To kind of borrow an analogy, I feel like this could be like our AOL moment of crypto where mainstream audiences get their first experience with really basic cryptocurrency concepts. Unfortunately, I think whatever version that these stablecoins that get through regulatory approval will not really embody most of the ideals of cryptocurrency that people like you and I appreciate. So for example, concepts like decentralization, permissionless access, and options for privacy. But however, I do believe that they will be a net positive on the ecosystem because ultimately any competition in the space is good in the long run.
Actually, I can agree there. I think there's a major difference between stablecoins like Libra or DCEP that is actually still considered closer to fiat. So it's not what really cryptocurrency is about, which actually brings two major aspects to the currency world. I think one is they're back to the market-based currency, like gold and silver was. And the other thing is that Bitcoin actually introduced what I call strong private property. So these are private properties that are more private than the properties that we know before. So they're more difficult to steal, more difficult to confiscate, So that's what I think that would be play a very core part of the virtual economy in the future.
Okay, and then Sunny, one last burning question that I'm very curious about. What do you do for fun?
I actually I used to play Go a little bit, but of course also only at a very amateurish level. But I think it's great fun. I actually would enjoy. I think I would enjoy playing against AIs like AlphaGo, but obviously with a very extreme handicap.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Sonny, thank you so much for being here. It's truly an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, it's the same. A really great honor to meet you for the first time.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for attending. We have a really great conference ahead of us. Please enjoy the show.